She was on her knees arranging white orchids along the base of a reception arch when the heels clicked in. Nana heard them before she saw her. Sharp. Deliberate. The kind of walk that expected rooms to move. She didn't look up. She had 40 minutes to finish dressing this hall, and she was not giving anyone 60 seconds of her time. You. The voice cut cleanly through the ballroom. The flowers are wrong. Nana placed the orchid stem down carefully before looking up. The woman standing over her looked expensive in the curated way some people wore wealth like armor. Cream blazer. Severe ponytail. Diamond studs small enough to brag quietly. She was staring at the arch with the expression of someone accustomed to correcting things. The orchids should be on the left side, she said. Not centered. Nana rose slowly, pulling off her gloves finger by finger. They're centered because that's where I put them. The woman blinked once. I don't think you understand, she said coolly. Move them. Nana looked at her for a long moment. No. A flicker of irritation crossed the woman's face. Then get your supervisor. I am the supervisor. Silence. Around them, venue staff suddenly became very interested in pretending not to listen. Nana picked up another orchid stem. If you have concerns about the design, she said evenly, you can speak to the venue coordinator after the reception. The woman gave a short laugh and glanced around the room, making sure she had an audience before speaking again. You people always want to act like you run something. The ballroom went still. Nana turned fully toward her. Say that again. The woman lifted her chin slightly. I said, I heard you. Nana took one measured step forward. I just want you to hear yourself clearly too. So later, when you're standing somewhere that actually matters, you'll remember this was the version of yourself you chose to be. For the first time, the woman hesitated. Nana held her gaze another second before speaking. You should leave. And somehow, quietly, it sounded less like a suggestion than a decision. The woman stared at her a moment longer, then turned sharply and walked out, her heels no longer landing quite as confidently as before. Nobody spoke. One of the venue assistants started clapping under her breath before catching herself. Nana went back to her orchids like nothing important had happened. If you've ever seen someone lose everything because they underestimated the wrong woman, this story is for you. Stay to the end, because one wrong room, one grieving mother, and one sentence said at the wrong time is about to change all of their lives forever. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Now, let's dive in. Nana didn't think about it again. That was the thing about Nana, she processed, she moved. She didn't carry what wasn't hers to carry. By 2 in the afternoon, she was in the east wing of the same venue, funeral clothes on, looking for Hall C. Her senior stylist Eunice had lost her father 2 days ago, and Nadia had promised she'd be there. She found a door marked with a small placard, pushed it open, and slipped into the back row. The room was dim and quiet. Incense. Soft Korean instrumental from a speaker near the front. About 30 people seated, most of them older, all of them still. She sat down. The woman beside her was small and elegantly dressed in black, her hands folded in her lap so tightly her knuckles had paled. She was staring at the photograph on the display stand at the front of the room, a man in his 60s, dignified, a slight smile. She hadn't looked away from it since Nadia sat down. Nana glanced at the program in her hand. Han Kyung-soo, beloved husband and father. The room number on the door had said C. Eunice's father's service was in Hall C. She looked at the door she'd come through. The placard outside. She'd misread it. This was Hall G. She should leave. She knew she should leave. She folded the program quietly and started to rise. Beside her, the woman in black reached for her teacup with unsteady hands. The cup caught the edge of the saucer badly enough that tea spilled across the tablecloth. Nana caught it before it tipped completely. I'm sorry, the woman whispered automatically, as if apologizing for taking up space. It's okay, Nana said softly. She set the cup back down properly and handed the woman a napkin. The woman took it slowly. Her fingers trembled once before tightening around it. Nana sat back down. A few moments later the woman spoke without looking at her. My husband hated hospitals, she said quietly. He said they smelled like endings. Nana listened. And when the woman kept talking, Nana stayed. Mrs. Han exhaled for what sounded like the first time in hours. And then, very quietly, she began to talk. About her husband. About the way he took his tea. About the argument they had 3 days before he got the diagnosis, something small, something stupid, and how she never fully let it go even after everything. Her voice was low enough that only Nana could hear. She spoke in pieces, the way grief came not in order, not cleanly. Nana listened. She didn't fill the silence with reassurances. She didn't say he's in a better place or he knew you loved him. She just listened and held the woman's hand and let her talk until she ran out of words. When the silence came back, it was softer than before. My son should be here, Mrs. Han said quietly. He called. He's coming. He's always coming. A pause. He carries too much. He always has. He'll be here, Nana said. Mrs. Han finally turned and looked at her. Really looked. Something moved across her face, not confusion exactly. Recognition of a kind that didn't require explanation. Stay, she said. Just until he comes. Nana stayed. He walked in 20 minutes later. She felt the room shift before she saw him. The way people straighten when someone with a certain kind of weight enters a space. She looked toward the door and saw a man in a dark suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt open like he'd pulled at it on the way in. Tall. Jaw tight. Eyes that moved through the room with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned early to assess everything before reacting to anything. They landed on his mother. And then on Nana. He crossed the room without stopping. Stood at the end of their row. His mother looked up at him and something in her face cracked open briefly before she composed it again. You're late, she said. I know, Yama. His voice was low. I'm sorry. He looked at Nana. Not with suspicion. With a question. Nadia spoke first, quietly. I came to the wrong hall. Your mother, she asked me to stay. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry for the intrusion. He studied her for a moment. Then he sat down on the other side of his mother without asking her to leave. The three of them sat in silence as the service resumed. At some point, Mrs. Han released Nana's hand and reached for her son's instead. Nana sat still, present, witness to a family's grief in a room she had wandered into by accident. She thought about leaving twice more. Both times something held her. The reception afterward was small. Quiet. Food on long tables, people speaking in low voices, the particular heaviness of a room that had finished the formal part of grief and didn't quite know what to do with the rest of it. Nana was preparing to find her coat when the door opened and Seon walked in. She had changed. Darker blouse, composed expression, the performance of mourning arranged carefully on her face. She moved through the room toward Mrs. Han with the practiced ease of someone who had rehearsed the moment. Then she saw Nana. She stopped walking. The recognition was instant. And what followed it, the calculation, the decision, happened in about 3 seconds. What is she doing here? Not whispered. Placed. Loud enough for the nearest cluster of people to hear, loud enough for Mrs. Han to hear, loud enough to make Nana the center of a question she hadn't asked to be in. I thought family space was being kept private. The room with the specific kind of quiet where everyone is listening and pretending not to. Mrs. Han set down her teacup. She stood up slowly. She was small, this woman, but the way she rose made the room feel like it contracted. She walked towards Seon with the unhurried certainty of someone who had decided something and was simply completing it. She slapped her. Not a symbolic slap. A full, clear, resounding slap that turned Seon's face to the side and left the room holding its breath. Then Mrs. Han spoke. In Korean first. Then in English. Her voice was controlled and absolute. This woman sat with me for an hour when I could not breathe. She held my hand. She listened to me talk about my husband while I was falling apart. She looked at Seon without blinking. You were supposed to be here at noon. It is now 4 o'clock. I called you twice. You didn't answer. A pause. Get out. Not her. You. Seon's hand was at her cheek. Her eyes had gone glassy, not with remorse, with shock. She turned to Juno. He was looking at her with an expression that was worse than anger. It was nothing. Flat, final, already decided. Juno looked at Seon for a long moment, but said nothing. Suyin straightened her blouse with trembling hands and walked out. The room exhaled. Nana found her coat. She said a quiet goodbye to Mrs. Han, who held her hand one more time before letting go. Then she walked out into the corridor. Juno was already there. "I'll walk you out," he said. It wasn't a question. They walked in silence through the venue corridor, past the hall she'd originally been looking for, out through the main doors into the gray afternoon. He stopped when they reached the car park. She looked at him for a moment, this man who had just buried his father's memory again for another year, who had walked into a room to find a stranger holding his mother together, who had stood completely still while the woman he was supposed to love made a scene at his father's memorial. "Your mother," Nana said. "She doesn't let people in easily, does she?" "Never," he said. "Not once in my life have I seen her take a stranger's hand." Nana nodded slowly. "I should actually find the funeral I came here for," she said, and for the first time that afternoon something close to embarrassment touched her voice. To his surprise, Juno laughed quietly. "Hall C," he said. 2 floors down. "Right." She exhaled once through her nose. "Thank you." Hall C was nearly empty by the time she finally found it. Eunice hugged her anyway. By the time Nana reached the car park again, the afternoon had turned gray. Juno was still there. She stopped beside her car, surprised. "You waited." Apparently. Something softened briefly at the corner of her mouth. "I'm sorry about your father," she said quietly. Then she got into her car and drove away. He stood there a moment longer, watching until her taillights disappeared. That night Suyin was in his apartment before he arrived. She'd used her key. She was sitting at his kitchen island with her hands wrapped around a glass of water, her eyes red, her posture arranged to receive comfort. "She humiliated me," Suyin said. "In front of everyone. Your mother." "My mother did what she did." Juno set his keys on the counter. His voice was quiet. "And I'm not going to talk about that. Juno. I'm going to tell you what I know." He looked at her. "This morning. The venue. The woman you spoke to." He watched her face. "Someone saw you. Heard every word. That woman you tried to embarrass owns her company. She was working. And you stood over her and said what you said." Suyin's jaw tightened. "She was on the floor. What did I ask you to do today?" "One thing." His voice didn't rise. "Be there. Be with my mother before the memorial started, while it was still hard." "I asked you for that one thing." He let the silence land. "Where were you at noon, Suyin?" She looked away. He didn't wait for the answer. He walked to his bedroom and closed the door. Nana was in her studio the next morning before anyone else arrived. She was rearranging a sample display, something to do with her hands while she thought, when her assistant Kemi came in with coffee and said nothing, which was exactly right. The day moved forward. Orders, client calls, a new consultation. She was good at this. She had built this from a folding table at a street market 6 years ago, and now she had a studio and a team and a waiting list. She didn't have time to carry other people's behavior around with her. She thought about Mrs. Han once, briefly. About the way the woman had talked about her husband's tea. About the argument they never fully resolved. She hoped she was sleeping. 3 weeks passed. Suyin made a mistake. Not a careless one, a deliberate one that she thought was careful enough. There was a man. Someone adjacent to Juno's world, close enough to be dangerous. She had been seeing him for 2 months, brief and encrypted in the way people encrypt things they know are wrong. But she'd gotten comfortable. The wrong dinner. The wrong part of the city. The wrong person walking past who owed Juno a loyalty she didn't account for. It was on his desk by Thursday morning. He read it once. He called her. She answered on the second ring with his name in her voice like a question. He told her it was over. She started to explain. He told her there was nothing to explain. She started to cry. He told her he hoped she found what she was looking for. He ended the call before she finished speaking. The apartment stayed silent for a long time afterward. He saw Nana on a Tuesday. He was leaving a meeting in the business district, walking to his car, head down, when he almost walked into her. She was coming out of a florist supply shop with 2 large bags and her phone pressed between her ear and her shoulder. She looked up. He looked up. She nearly dropped a bag. "What are the odds?" he said. She laughed before she could stop herself. It was involuntary and real, and it did something to the afternoon. He took one of the bags without asking. She raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. Coffee, he said. If you have time. She had time. They sat in a corner cafe 2 blocks down and talked for an hour and 40 minutes. He asked about her business, how she started, how long it took before it felt real. She asked about his work without asking about his work, which he noticed and appreciated. She was precise in conversation. She listened the way she had listened to his mother fully, without waiting for her turn. At some point, she set her cup down and looked at him directly. Your girlfriend, she said. What about her? We're not together anymore. Since when? 3 weeks ago. She nodded. Didn't push. Didn't perform relief or sympathy. She picked her cup back up. After they left the cafe, he walked her to her car, waited until she drove off, and disappeared again for 6 days. No messages. No calls. Nana told herself she hadn't expected any. Still, she noticed the silence. Then the flowers arrived at the studio the following Tuesday morning. Not roses. White ranunculus in a simple wrap with no card except 4 words written in clean handwriting. I remembered your favorite. Cian found out on a Friday. She had her sources, she always had her sources, and what came back to her was that Juno had been seen with a black woman at a cafe in the business district. Laughing. For nearly 2 hours. She knew who it was before she finished the sentence. She found Nana's studio address the same day. She came on Saturday morning when the street was still quiet. Nana was outside signing for a delivery when the car pulled up. Cian got out already talking. You think you're clever, she said. Going after him the moment. I'm going to stop you there. Nana handed the clipboard back to the delivery driver and turned to face her fully. You need to leave. You think you won something? Cian stepped closer. You think sitting in his mother's grief made you special? Nana didn't move. Go home, Cian. 3 years, Cian said. Her voice cracked sharply. 3 years, and suddenly he's looking at you like. She caught Nana's wrist without thinking. Tight. Emotional. Immediate. Nana twisted free in one controlled movement and stepped back. Don't do that again, she said quietly. Cian was breathing hard. Her eyes were wild with a humiliation she hadn't expected. You should leave, Nana said. And you should not come back. Cian left. But her eyes said she wasn't finished. Nana called Juno that afternoon. Told him what happened. Calmly, factually, the same way she told him everything. He was silent for 3 seconds. Are you hurt? No. Another silence. Then I'll handle it. He went to Cian that evening. He didn't sit down. He stood in her doorway and spoke for 2 minutes. His voice never rose. He told her that if she went near Nana again, her studio, her home, anywhere, he would make her life in this city very, very small. He told her this was the only time he would say it. She looked up at him with something desperate and fracturing in her eyes and said she still loved him. He said he knew. And he left. He took Nana to the Han River on a Wednesday evening. They walked slowly, bought street food from a cart near the bridge, argued gently about which direction had the better view. She said east. He said she was wrong. She told him to prove it. He couldn't entirely and admitted it. On their 4th date, she made him come to a flower market at 6 in the morning because she had an order to fill. He came without complaining. He learned the difference between garden roses and spray roses. He held bags. He didn't complain once. She looked at him across a bucket of dahlias at 6:30 in the morning and thought that she was in very serious trouble. When he told her it was official, when he said it plainly, without theater, just looked at her over dinner and said, I want this to be something real, she was quiet for a moment. It already is, she said. Cian found out the way people always find out the things that hurt them most, through a photo that wasn't meant to be seen. A friend of a friend. A story reposted. Nana in frame with Juno at an event, his hand at the small of her back, both of them not looking at the camera because they were looking at each other. She showed up at his building. The lobby. Crying before she got through the door, calling his name to the intercom. He listened to the intercom for a moment. Then he called down to security. Please escort her out. She's not to be let up. If she comes back, call me. He heard her voice through the speaker. Juno, please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please, and he stood in his kitchen and felt nothing he hadn't already finished feeling. My mother wants to meet you properly. Sunday. Family dinner. Nana looked up from a swatch of ivory silk. How many people? 8. Maybe 10. My mother, 2 of my uncles, my younger sister. A few others. She looked at him. You'll be fine, he said. I know I'll be fine, she said. I just wanted a number. She wore a deep burgundy dress and arrived 6 minutes early. Juno opened the door and looked at her for a moment longer than necessary before stepping aside. The apartment was warm. Something was cooking, something with ginger and soy, and soft conversation filtered from the dining area. She followed him in. Mrs. Han came out of the kitchen before they reached the dining room. She stopped when she saw Nana. Just stopped, fully, in the middle of the hallway. Then she crossed the space between them and pulled Nana into her arms. Not a polite embrace. A real one. The kind that said, I know you already, and I am glad you are here. I told him, Mrs. Han said against her shoulder, from the beginning. I told him. Juno met Nana's eyes over his mother's head. She saw something in his face that she had not seen before, relief and softness, and something close to wonder. Dinner was loud in the way families are loud when there's enough joy in the room to make noise feel like safety. His sister teased him mercilessly. His mother kept putting food on Nana's plate. She kept saying she had enough, and Mrs. Han kept ignoring her. It was his uncle Byung-soo who went quiet. He was the oldest person at the table, 70s, silver-haired, the kind of stillness that came from outlasting most things. He had been watching Nana with a look she couldn't quite name since they were introduced. Now he set his chopsticks down. What was your father's name? He said. The table didn't go quiet immediately. It took a moment, rippling outward. Nana looked at him. Daniel. Daniel Ose-Mensa. Byung-soo was still for a long moment. Then something moved across his face, slow, tidal, the way old memories surface. Danny, he said. Nana's breath caught. He never told you, Byung-soo said. It wasn't a question. He looked around the table, at Mrs. Han, who had gone very still, at Juno, who was watching his uncle. 19 years ago, this family had a problem that would have ended everything. Not business. Family. Something that could not leave this room and could not be solved by anyone in this room. He looked back at Nana. A man came to us. A friend of a connection that barely existed. He solved it. Quietly. No fee. No favor asked. He said only, I don't want to know why. I just want you to be okay. He paused. He said his daughter was young. That he wanted to leave the world cleaner than he found it. The table was completely silent. Nana felt Juno's hand find hers beneath the table. Your father helped this family during a difficult time, Byung-soo said quietly. He refused payment. Refused favors. He said kindness became complicated the moment people started owing each other for it. He looked at Nana carefully. I never forgot him after that. Mrs. Han looked at her quietly for a moment. Strange, she said softly. The way some people arrive. Later, much later, after the dishes were cleared and the uncles had gone home and his sister had fallen asleep on the sofa, Juno and Nana stood on his balcony. The city was quiet below them. She had her arms on the railing, and he was beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Your father would have liked this, he said. He would have been insufferable about it, she said. He would have said, I told you so, even though he never told me anything. Juno smiled. He reached over and tucked a loose braid behind her ear, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw for just a moment. She turned to look at him. He looked back at her the way he had looked at her across his mother's dining room, like she was something he hadn't known he was waiting for and had no intention of letting go of now that he'd found her. What are you thinking? She said. That you walked into the wrong funeral, he said, and somehow everything in my life got more right. She laughed, that same involuntary, unguarded laugh from the Tuesday afternoon that had undone the whole day. He kissed her there on the balcony while the city hummed below them, gentle and certain, the kind of beginning that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. It already was. If this story pulled you in, Like the video and subscribe for more slow burn dramas, impossible encounters, and the kind of quiet power that changes everything when the room least expects it. See you in the next one.